Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, and today I'm coming at you with a video where we're going to rank all the legendaries in the set 1 of Disney's new Lorcana. If you haven't already though, please hit that subscribe button down in the bottom corner. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most, with this channel being dedicated to the card games that I play. Now this particular video, now that the full spoiler has been released, we've had a couple of days for some real deck building and some competitive play online. I wanted to go through and review each and every one of the legendaries so that you can be best informed what to prioritize whenever you're looking for singles after the set drops. We do have Gen Con coming up this weekend, which will have our pre-release, with official release being August 18th, and then the mass market release on September 1st. So these will kind of help you prioritize what I think will be the most highly sought after and most highly played copies of these cards in the game. Having said that, I would love to hear your input as well, so let me know in the comments section down below what you guys think about the legendaries now that we have had the first set reveal. Without further ado though, let's jump into those reviews. Okay, first let's take a look at the categories we have here. We've got format defining up at the top here. These are the cards that I think are actually going to dictate a lot of what the meta has available out there. These are the ones that are actually going to be the reason why you're building those decks and playing those decks, or playing counters to those decks, versus just cards that are going to be in those decks, which is going to lead us to the next category, which is the auto include. These are the cards that if you're playing that color, you're going to have 4 of these probably in the deck, or at least some number of them in the deck, because there's really no reason to not have some number of them in the deck. They're just good all-around cards that just are worth a spot no matter what way and what direction you're kind of going with that particular build. Playable. These are cards that could very well be in any deck that's out there, but if you're not built around kind of the playstyle they're probably not going to be in there. Not bad cards, but just cards that have to be built around and really have support to really shine and be effective in the metagame. Situational is kind of one step down from that. These are ones that are, even if built around, they're really only going to be effective if people are playing the decks that they're effective against. Cards that might not necessarily have targets or win conditions available to them unless your opponents are playing specific cards. Now, these are cards that could absolutely shine if those situations become a big portion of the meta game, but more often than not, you're not going to have these in the deck unless you're expecting to go up against certain other factors. And then unplayable is just like it sounds. These are cards that I can't think of any reason why you would ever play these cards. They're just not good. They don't do enough for their cost, or don't have enough impact on the board to ever be worth an inclusion into the decks that you're building. So first and foremost, we're going to go through the list left to right here. I'll try to organize them in the tiers as I think they are even inside those categories. And we will start with Beast here. Beast, I am going to put here in playable. He is a 5-drop, uninkable, 4/4 with 2 lore generation. He has rush and the ability to tap or exert all of your opponent's characters that are damaged when he comes into play. Now, the fact that he is not inkable definitely takes him out of the auto include for me. He is very situational. However, for green pairs very nicely with other colors that have just better answers. If you're looking for rush attackers, or if you're looking for removal in that 5-drop spot, it just has a lot outside of green, albeit, that can do it better. So I do think this guy, while good, is going to struggle to find a home in most green builds, just because I think the other color is going to supplement it enough to where he is not going to be needed. Now, Belle is kind of a tricky one. Belle could easily end up in format defining. However, I have not been real impressed with the builds that are using Belle right now. Certainly not an auto include, because she does have to be built around. So I'm going to put her in playable, but I am going to put her ahead of Beast in the playable. She's probably the top end of playable here, because in the decks that want her, she is very, very good. Those decks probably are just falling kind of out of favor now because people know what they're trying to do. The blue or the sapphire, the sapphire steel deck is probably the best version of Belle that I've seen. And once people know kind of the aggressive hand dumping style that you're trying to play and then refresh your hand with a whole new world, they can start adjusting for that as well, being more aggressive with their plays, being more aggressive with their inks, knowing that they're going to get a free draw 7 whenever you go to play it for yourself. I think the lack of surprise factor that deck has drops its overall impact quite a bit. But in that deck, she is absolutely an all-star. The red versions of this deck are, albeit slightly more consistent, but I find that she really just drains your hand very fast, and too much so to where I would keep her out of the format defining. I think the blue ramp decks can survive without her ability, and in some situations I think her ability can be more of a detriment than a help. So I'm going to put her in the playable. Again, very good, but not format defining, and certainly not an auto include. We have 8-drop Elsa here. I'm also going to put her in the playable section. She's an 8-drop. She's not inkable. That pretty much takes her out of the auto-include category. And I don't think that she's got enough support to be format defining right now. She's very good, and I think she'll be a highly sought-after card just due to popularity. But the fact that she comes in and really requires somebody else's help in the 8-drop spot to really make her shine. If she didn't have shift, she probably would drop further down this list. But again, she'll be a valuable card because she's popular. Future sets, we may get enough support for her dealing with those exerted characters, keeping them exerted longer, that she may be less situational and more into that auto-include for Amethyst. But right now, I just don't think that she's there. Gantu, he is our first entry into the unplayable category. I'm not sure what they were thinking about with this guy. I'm almost positive they could not have play tested him and thought that this was a worthwhile expenditure of 8 resources. For 8 ink in a color that really doesn't have any way to get to 8 by itself, he is inkable. For 6/6, which is not fantastic for an 8-drop. 2 lore generation, not fantastic for an 8-drop. So he should have a really impactful ability, right? He does not. He basically turns off your opponent's smaller characters so that they cannot challenge your characters. Now, they can't do it at all, so it's not like a partial shutdown. However, there's not much challenging that's happening turn 8 of a game. They're trying to beat you at that point in time if they have any small characters left. Steel has a lot of ways to deal with small characters much more efficiently than 8 to have them not on the board at all. So the fact that this guy comes in and effectively says, hey, the last few turns, instead of questing for the win, which you're probably doing, you can't challenge, so you have to quest, is just a bad all-around ability. Unimpressive stats for an 8-drop. The fact that he's inkable is literally his only saving grace and not worth being included in a deck for that. All right, next up we have Hades and our first entry into the format defining cards. Now he is a 7-drop. He is not inkable though. He is a 3 strength, 6 willpower. So stats are okay, probably a little below average for a 7-drop. 2 lore generation, again, probably a little below average for a 7-drop. Nothing crazy, but he has the ability to banish a character and send it straight to your opponent's ink, well, similar to the song Let It Go. This is the go-to removal spell for pretty much all the ramp decks towards their top end. He is in the color for the ramp colors, so every ramp deck that is being built is going to be playing 4 copies of this guy. And even in a non-ramp build of blue, 7 is not a far reach for a deck to naturally get to over the course of a game. Now, you're probably not playing 4 of this guy if you're not playing ramp, but the fact that you can still have 2 of them in a deck that's just going to try to organically get to 7 makes this guy extraordinary. He is going to be one of the higher priced legendaries in my opinion, just because everyone is going to be trying to get 4 of this guy. And again, just a format defining card. If you have a deck that just bricks to this guy, you probably don't want to be playing that deck right now, because this guy is going to be everywhere when people start playing competitively. All right, next one up, and right next to Hades is going to be Maleficent. I'm going to put her just under Hades, even though she basically performs the exact same function as Hades. She is that top-end removal for the blue-red ramp decks that are out there. Now, she takes 2 more to get into play than Hades, so it is a more dedicated ramp deck than is required for Hades. But she is inkable, whereas he is not. So if you draw multiples of her and you draw them early, you can put her into the inkwell, whereas Hades is just going to sit into your hand until you can resolve him. Stats, a little bit beefier on the stats. You get a lot more strength and a little less on the willpower. Similar effect, however, she just straight banishes a character. They don't get to go and ramp with it into their inkwell. So a slightly better card, more dedicated resources than Hades, and it does lock you into those 2 colors, whereas Hades can be in multiple versions of the ramp deck. Maleficent is just going to be in that ramp deck. However, she is definitely going to be in that ramp deck as it is very consistent and a very beefy character for the top end of that deck. Next one up, we've got Mickey Mouse. The Taylor Mickey Mouse here at 8-drop going into the playable. This is a guy's very good stats. He's evasive, 4 lore generation, all around great card. Unfortunately, red is fairly weak outside of the ramp deck, and the ramp deck just has better options to play at the top end. They're playing for Hades. They're playing for Maleficent. They're playing for Be Prepared. It's like their top end is already pretty loaded up, that this guy really doesn't have a place in that deck. So the fact that he's evasive and produces 4 lore a turn is great, but unfortunately there's just not a red deck that is playing him right now. He's definitely not an auto include because you're not getting to 8 organically. You're going to be ramping if you're getting to 8. I think if you get this guy in play, he is perfectly good. One of the best cards out there for lore generation. I just don't think he's going to see a ton of play, unfortunately, because he's just going to be overshadowed by characters that have come into play effects that are more detrimental than the lore generation buff that he provides. All right, next up is Rapunzel. This one's kind of a tricky one. I feel like she's probably at the bottom end of format defining or the top end of auto include. I'm going to go ahead and put her at the top end of format defining. The Lilo and Stitch deck right now is probably on par for the second kind of category of tier 1 decks. That Amber Rush, whatever color you end up putting in with Amber, that Rush build that's on there. This is the most card advantageous card that we have in set 1, which in and of itself probably should put it in the format defining. Now, stats wise, she is nothing really impressive after she resolves her come into play ability. 2 lore generation on a 4-drop is pretty average for Amber. 1/5 stats are pretty abysmal. She can survive a few challenges possibly, but she's not taking anybody with her with that 1 strength. Her real ability though is when she comes in and heals, she can draw cards, and the fact that on turn 4 you can play a body, heal one of your guys, and draw up to 3 cards is absolutely insane. Now, on average, when I've played this deck, she usually is only healing for 2 on average, but still that is a ton. She's replacing herself plus 1 card, and you have a 2 lore generating body on the board now, which is just insane value. She's definitely going to be in every Amber deck that gets built, but I think she's also probably the biggest reason that the Lilo and Stitch deck has a little extra reach, because if they can stop you from getting to your 6-drop Stitch, that really slows down that deck's ability to replenish its hand. If she can come in, save one of your bodyguard guys, and draw 1 to 2 to even 3 cards off of it, it's just insane value for that particular deck. John Silver here, I'm going to put him in the auto include list here. Now, this guy is super strong all the way around. There's not really anything that he does that is so over the top that it would just be game warping in and of itself. So I don't know that he's necessarily format defining, but he's a 6-drop inkable, which is always a plus being inkable. Never a penalty for having this guy in your hand. 5/5, pretty robust body for a 6-drop. 2 lore generation. Again, probably slightly below average for Emerald, but solid nonetheless, with an ability that triggers both when he comes into play and whenever he quests. And that ability is to give something else reckless. So this has an immediate impact when it comes into play. There's a number of games I've won just by playing this guy and targeting their highest lore generator and forcing them to attack the following turn. Combos very well with what Green's trying to do in their lower end with like Flynn Rider, the Cheshire Cat, by forcing them to challenge into those kind of characters, generating value. Mad Hatter, another good example of one that you want to have challenged to replenish your hand. That ability is very, very good. The fact that it comes in, it has the enter the battlefield play, and every time he does it is extra bonus. And again, the fact that he's inkable just means there's really almost no reason to not have this guy in a deck. If you're playing green, he's almost always going to be relevant if you get to 6, and he's going to help you get to 6 if not, because he is inkable. Next one up, we've got 7-drop Stitch. I'm going to put this guy in situational. I think in the right situation and the right color combination, this guy could be playable. The fact that he takes 7 in a deck that struggles to get to like 5 and 6 most times really makes this guy not appealing. He doesn't have shift. His overall stats are not very impressive for really anything Amber's trying to do. Now, the fact that he comes in and draws 2 cards, if you have 2 cards in play, 2 characters rather in play already, is this guy's kind of claim to fame. If a deck emerges that can realistically get to 7 in Amber consistently, I think this guy has a home. I think the other condition of having 2 characters in play for Amber is very easy to accomplish. And playing a big body and then drawing 2 cards is a very powerful effect set 1. I just don't know that there's a build of Amber that's going to emerge that can consistently cast him at 7. He is inkable though, so even if you can't get him down, he can at least help. Doesn't slow your game plan down from the rest of the stuff you're trying to do. Again, I can see a situation where this guy becomes playable, but off the top of my head, I can't think of a deck that he really naturally fits in. Taka is kind of a tough one for me. I almost want to put it in auto include because it's just so good stats wise. However, I don't know there's a lot of decks that you steal that want to be doing what this card is doing. Now, if a more traditional steel deck emerges, I could see that. I'm going to put it down in playable, towards the top end of playable. Under Belle, I do think she's more impactful than Taka is. The ability to challenge, and if the character is banished, to generate the same amount of lore that you would even if you quested with this, that's a ton of value. To not be put behind because you're not questing, still controlling the board, good stats on a 6-drop, inkable as well. There's very few reasons not to include this. The only problem with this is there's just not a steel deck that I've seen right now that really is playing this play style. Most of them are all going for that hyper aggressive, play your hand out as fast as you possibly can and start playing a whole new world, or kind of top ending at Tinkerbell basically. And this character is just past that threshold. This character would always be in your hand or have to be inked when you're playing a whole new world, and your top end is just not looking for this in the way a lot of the decks are being built. Now, that could transition differently. Prior to kind of the full spoiled list, I was playing a Emerald Steel deck that did want this in the top end and was very effective in the top end. It's just not where the meta is going right now. So I put it in playable. I could easily see it transitioning to the auto include though. Last one here is going to be Ursula. Put her in the situational, almost unplayable. The situation is really just how much multiplayer you're going to play. If you're playing a lot of multiplayer, she is an absolutely insane card. She's the only card on this list that scales infinitely based on the number of people that you are playing. She basically comes into play, steals a lore from everybody, and for each lore she steals, you're going to draw a card. Now, in a 1v1 game, it's going to take one lore away from one person, and you're going to draw one card. If you have 8 people playing, it's going to steal 7 lore and draw you 7 cards, as long as everybody at the table had some lore to take. Her stats, not super impressive. She is hard to kill with that giant willpower, and she does generate a lot of lore herself. Being a 7-drop, being inkable, again, in a competitive 1v1 format, she's just not good enough to make it. You have way better options in purple at that cost. She's 1 under Elsa. She's the same cost as Dr. Facilier, who is infinitely better in a 1v1 matchup. She's really going to scale dramatically, though, if you're playing a multiplayer. If you're playing a multiplayer deck, this is probably one of the better cards, probably jumps up to your auto-include or format defining, even if you are playing in that format. But most of us are going to be playing in 1v1s, and for the 1v1 format, she's just not good enough to be in really any of the decks that I think would be competitive. So there you guys have it. There is the tier list for Set 1 Legendaries for Disney's Lorcana. Again, make sure you let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of these Legendaries. Until next time, guys, Hobby Hero, out.